I'm resident of Collinwood, Joel Sands, joined by my buddy Patrick McCray, author of the Dark Shadows Daybook. We're here to discuss 1841 Parallel Time, episode 1229. We are getting close, and I love Grayson Hall's narration in this. She starts this with the narration, and we catch up. I love how they do the little flashback here where we left off from, and they redo this. It's really well done. The beginning opening of the
Yeah,
end of the previous episode. What did you
I
think?
agree.
It's
I
really
thought it was really well done, as a variation on the end of the previous episode.
yeah, and I like the fact that
Yes, well, the music is different, and that clues you in to the fact that we're going to get more. That this is going to be something else. It's going to have a slightly different emotional tone, and it does. I mean, I have overall thoughts on that episode. That's my main thought on that sequence. What stood out in that sequence to you?
most stood out in the sequence. I think the fact you're right. You do get different music, and actually, Kate Jackson stands out a lot more in the reshoot in the way they reshot this. She doesn't she doesn't quite look like James Storm in the reshoot. She actually does look a
I
lot
didn't think
better.
she looked like James Storm. I thought she looked like Judah
Oh,
Zachary.
Judah Zachary. She doesn't look like She doesn't look like Judah Zachary in the reshoot, which I like. She looks a lot more serious too. To me, she's there's a lot. You can tell there's a lot of emotion running through her with her facial feature. A little more this time, I think, and I love it for that. And we're gonna get a lot of emotion from her in this episode. I love
Yeah,
Kate Jackson in this episode here.
she's
She's
great.
calling out Bramwell. She's calling out Catherine. She's having
She has every right to.
yeah, and she's confiding in the least likely person, Julia Collins, which
I
it
know.
doesn't. I love the fact that Julia doesn't come off as a total heel here. She's somewhat, but she's also right too. There's a lot of, again,
It's
we're continuing the adult theme of the show with this arc. There's a lot of, just like in the prior episode you and I discussed, there was a lot of adulthood. There's a lot of adulthood in this episode too, because we're actually we just looked at Morgan like, really, you're gonna call it your wife because she was friends with Bramwell, she had feelings for Bramwell, and you're gonna call it Bramwell. Well, now you have, because Daphne is married to Bramwell, and Daphne has seen them kiss. Now she's going to call them out, and it's a great sequence. The way that everything gets
it
done
is
in
a
this episode. What did you think? I'm sorry, I'm
I
rambling.
totally no. That's what stood out to you, and it's true. But being a soap, they managed to have it be all very dramatic,
Yeah,
and at the same time, less happens than you think is happening. In a regular movie or drama, this plot would be halfway over by now, but they still have weeks left to go. And so it's interesting how they can have so much talk that's meaningful, and yet so little sometimes happens. There's been a major character shift, but in terms of how they act on it, it really takes its time. And in that sense, it makes it less like a movie and more like real life.
yeah. It it makes all these episodes feel really meaningful too. The way they're presenting them too. Each episode, even though it's all continuity, has its own uniqueness to it. And I really love the uniqueness of Kate Jackson, but also just when you think you've seen the best of Keith Prentice as James Forsythe,
He's back.
he's back with this episode, and I
I,
love him here.
I knew you would be excited.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
I
Red letter day.
go
No,
ahead.
you go. What do you got?
Well,
No, you.
James Forsythe looks at everybody just like he's back in the past, even though his body's in the present. He's looking at everybody like they're from his time. He's looking at Julia Collins as Constance Collins, the sister of Bramwell. He's looking at uh, got Carrie Stokes as his sister Sarah. It's really, really well done by Keith Prentice, and by God, does he sell the hell out of it. And I love everyone's interaction about it.
It is one of those times, though, when I go back and think about it, when people would say, boy, you had to watch every day and it sure was confusing and so on and so forth, where I think they're being lame. Nevertheless, I get what they mean, because not only are we trying to keep track of characters we only recently met in the series, but we're trying to keep track of what they were called in a past sequence we have not yet been to.
Yeah. I think, though, too, what the writers are, again, the writers themselves are setting up the flashback through all this, through the possession of Keith Prentice's character, and he's the one who's going to tell us the story. And with this episode, this is sort of the pretext for all that, where you're getting, okay, finally, after confronting the ghost, because after confronting the ghost of Brutus Collins is when James Forsythe goes to lay down in the room and Catherine's babysitting him in the prior episode. So we don't see him that whole episode. When he returns this episode, this is why his return is that much important, because, hey, he's still James Forsythe, and now instead of looking at the people like he was, like, oh, you're just modern day Collinses, no, they all resemble somebody from his own timeline, which was really,
which is the first. It's the first time we've heard of that kind of phenomenon since 1795.
Yep.
I think, where they're talking about that issue.
It's
So that to me is really interesting.
Yeah, you could sort of say with 1795, you're more doing somewhat of the Wizard of Oz with Victoria Winters, where she's looking at everybody like they're from her 1967 timeline. And then when she comes back, it's sort of similar, but in reverse. With this, it's not so much Wizard of Oz. It's more somebody coming to the terms of looking at people of how he actually saw them, because he's not Keith Prentice as Morgan Collins, he's Keith Prentice as James Forsythe. And I think that's one of the things they hammer home definitely on this episode. I agree. The writers do a really great, and so does Keith Prentice. I'm not taking anything away from him. They both do a great job of getting across and really pay great attention. If anybody goes back and watches these episodes, pay attention to 1229, because you're going to hear James Forsythe, Keith Prentice's character. He's not going to say Julia Collins. He's going to say Constance. When he sees Carrie Stokes, he thinks it's Amanda, which is a commonality because Amanda has blonde hair. Now, when we turn, he says Sarah. I don't think in the cottage him saying Amanda is a mess up. I think him saying Amanda is a natural response, because we're going to find out in the flashback, where did they meet? In the cottage. And
yes,
so when he sees someone who he thinks is his sister, Sarah Collins, it's a really great callback to the ghost he dug up, and it makes sense. Just really great stuff. What's your favorite?
Yeah, I agree.
Sorry, what's your favorite part about this episode?
I think we hit the nail on the head. It's Keith Prentice suddenly laying on more and more layers of his own past. It's Forsythe, really reliving things and layering that in as thoroughly as he does. I love that. I think it's really good. There is one other moment that I just thought was kind of funny, and maybe it's because I was dealing with something like this last night, but It's when he's talking to Julia, he gets ticked off. It's at the beginning of the episode. He gets ticked off. He says, I'm just going to go. And she's like, no, don't go. And now I'm going to go. And for some reason, I had the idea, it's like when a cat gets out of the house and it's there at the doorway. I just imagined her going, anything she could to lure him back in. Yeah. And then she thought maybe there was a chance she could do it. That's my own imagination running wild with me. But it just sort of struck me like he was being a petulant cat.
I think there's a part
just
of Julia,
get out of the house.
Yeah, there's a part of Julia that's sort of scared to follow James Forsythe a bit here because she's not sure how he'll act. They know they're all too familiar. This also shows, this is another episode that shows how familiarity the Collinses are with the room and how people act coming out of it. That is forever yes. on the character's mind, especially. And again, I have two favorite scenes here. Obviously, the James Forsythe thing in the what was Matthew Morgan's cottage in the other time. With this, I love Grayson Hall's not going after Morgan, who she views as Morgan, but it's James Forsythe, because even though she knows it's James Forsythe, she knows what happens. She knows the fact, not necessarily what happens to her, but she knows what happens to the people coming out of the room. If they're not dead, they go mad or crazy and try to kill somebody. We've seen that with Gabriel.
Sure.
We're told about it with Justin. So now you're seeing Julia really afraid. And even though she doesn't show fear, you can sort of tell that's in her mind. And I love the performance from Grayson Hall for it.
It's very powerful.
It is.
But, Grayson's always rely on her for that.
Yeah.
That's the beauty of that character.
What did you think of Daphne in this episode? Really, really good.
I can't believe Kate Jackson's only about 19.
Yeah.
Her acting is so mature and so strong, and it just makes me appreciate someone who, had it not been for her success, she would have gone on to be a great actress. Do you know what I mean? You sort of get trapped by TV, and then that defines you.
Yeah.
And I feel like that sort of is what happened there, because it's one of the best performances on the show. It's like this whole sequence, this Ragnarok, 1841 parallel time is one of the most interesting, one of the most mature, one of the best acted, best written sequences on the show, when it had the least number of viewers, and was the least remembered. And that always strikes me as cosmically unfair.
Yeah, Kate Jackson, you're right. It is hard to believe she's only 19 because her acting is very, I agree with you 1,000%. Her acting is very mature. And throughout the episodes, we get that too with her when she's on. She's very mature. Her character comes across as very mature. And that's because the actress is making that work. No offense to the writers.
Yes.
The writers deserve credit for the lines, but it's Kate Jackson's job to sell her body, her facial reactions, and to play the character as mature as possible. And she absolutely does it. With this episode, it shows her complete vulnerability of the situation, of her situation. And I really love her display here. Really great job.
I agree. How close are we to the flashback?
I believe it's 1,301. I believe is so. We're 2 episodes away. It might.
Are you excited,
dude? I've seen this flashback. It's really good. It's up there with 1795, I think, because of the way it's not
one episode.
Here's why. It's not done with literally somebody going back to time. This is somebody reliving the time they were in, and you're being told what happened, and yet you're seeing it. it's a really good job by the camera crew, how they work this, the writers. Again, I know I'm jumping ahead here, but it is really, really greatly written, and I can't wait till we get to it.
I mean, that's kind of the for me, that's the real sizzle to the steak, is that sequence. And I'm just riding it out, waiting to get there. I'm getting more and more anxious about it. In fact, the closer we get.
It's really good. I think the one thing I'll say too is to actually meet Brutus. We've seen Brutus as a ghost. We've seen his brutality as a ghost. But to see his brutality as a human in that episode, it just makes you hate him much more.
Everything makes sense.
Yep.
Everything they've been talking about suddenly makes sense with this. And that to me is really kind of the exciting storytelling of it.
And I'll mention this now, but I'll re-mention it when we cover the episode. What really makes sense is all the misdirection the writers did. It makes sense because...
In what sense?
The truth is always the hardest to hear and find out about, especially in the flashback episode, because they all believe they didn't know who did the curse. They didn't know who put the curse on this household. They know that their ancestor Brutus did somebody curse that somebody hated Brutus Collins. That's what they were led to believe. And it's easy to believe that when you have misinformation in your own household. Now, when they even thought it was initially James Forsythe, now when it's revealed, no, it was your own family member, you get why the misdirection is set, because when you hear the truth of the matter, it's not just that much horrifying, it's that much shocking. For the first time, a blood relative of the Collinses cursed their ass, and it's really well done.
Yeah. Yeah. It's always the outsider who does that rather than the insider.
Yep.
So what do you make of that? That now it's the insider who's doing it.
I think it was really, again, it's really, really clever, and it's really, really smart, because they could have just did rinse and repeat. You know what I mean? They could have just made them an outsider like they did before with Angelique. Okay, Angelique becomes a Collins, but she marries into the family. She's not a blood Collins. It's always been an outsider.
No.
You've sort of pointed this out. It's always been an outsider that has affected the household most. Not quite this time. Yes, James Forsythe is an outsider, but Brutus Collins is the responsible party for the mess that they are in. And it really hits home, too.
So do you think this is maybe a commentary that the Collinses have always been the ones actually responsible for their own curses? Because that's what I get from it.
I think so. And I think you could sort of maybe... Let's look at our buddy Barnabas for a moment. When Angelique died,
Okay.
Angelique dies after his curse is lifted. And you could make the debate that maybe Barnabas's curse was his own doing. Maybe it was all in his mind. Maybe it was all, you could always look at something in a different light. Now, again, if you don't, that's fine. But it's really interesting to look at Barnabas.
Well, if you don't, you're wrong. You must be punished. No, I'm kidding.
Oh my God. No, but you're really
nice.
Well, listen, I always enjoy talking Dark Shadows with anybody, and you especially, because it's a lot
and I qualify as anybody.
And it's fun. It's fun. It's a fun show to talk about.
It is. Absolutely. It's refreshing to do it. I think, you when did you first watch the show?
When I was a teenager, I was 13, 14 years old. I believe I was still 13 when the show was in syndication. So when they first aired it on Sci-Fi Channel, and they had showed it from the very beginning. That's when I was just I was just sitting there one morning and I turned on the TV and I turned it on sci-fi because I'd been watching Sci-Fi Channel and I turned it on and because Sci-Fi Channel also at late at nights they would show anime. They were sort of they weren't
Yes.
quite what Adult Swim is today, but they were Adult Swim-ish, we'll say. Um,
Okay.
so early morning, I got up, I turned on the TV, I was into horror, and I see this black and white sort of train coming at me, and I'm like, okay, I'll watch this. And as soon as I heard Alexander Moltke's voice, I was hooked. I just wanted to keep watching it. Then the next episode aired. Then the next episode aired. I was like, wow, this is really cool. And my mom come in, she goes, what are you watching? I said, I'm watching this show called Dark Shadows. And it was on commercial. And she goes, well, did the vampire show up yet?
Oh, that's right. Yeah, she outed the whole thing.
Yeah, I was like, the what? Because it was only a couple episodes in for the beginning. She goes, oh, I somewhat spoiled it for you, but I won't spoil the rest of it for you. You'll enjoy the ride. It's fun. And she was right.
Did you? Who was you? Who? When did you first start to really get a chance to talk Dark Shadows with people?
With my brother, actually, when I was growing up, I was talking to him about it and some of our friends. And they asked me what it was about, and I explained the show and its context. I said, well, the show starts off with this governess. And I said, I sort of explained it the way the website would. The Victoria Winters meets a ghost, a phoenix, and then a vampire. And that vampire is Barnabas Collins. And I said, and
Mhm.
this is what happens to him. This is how he gets cursed. And that's something I would explain. And my brother's like, doesn't he? And my brother goes, well, he was watching it. And then that's when Barnabas, by the time my brother watched it with me, he's like, wait, I thought you said he was a vampire. So they were in the Adam arc when he was watching it with me. And I said, they're going to cure him
Okay.
here. I said, yeah. I said, he was. I said, but Dr. Eric Lane has given him medicine to partially cure him, but it's not a permanent solution. That's why they're creating Adam. And he's like, holy shit, that dude's tall. that
Adam
was
is tall.
and that was
Yep.
Robert Rodan.
That was around the time that I think I really officially got into the series. Also,
Yeah.
was around then. I had watched the Vicky, or I'd watched the Maggie stuff. I'd watched parts of 1795, but it just didn't grab me the way I sort of felt like I was obligated to be grabbed. And it was only when they got to the Atom business that I thought, okay, this is really new.
Yeah.
This is where, the Fangoria articles and so on and so forth became very vague. And I appreciate what I'm getting to see here.
Yeah.
So that was around it for me also.
Yeah, it's where Adam is most enjoyable, I think, too, with Robert Rodan's performance. Robert Rodan really brings out the best in the character because the writers and him are showing how a character starts off sort of as a grown baby slash man, and you get to watch him make the mistakes a human would or somebody does, and then there's sort of a Jiminy Cricket moment between. I love how Humbert Allen Alstretta's character Nicholas Blair is trying to teach him bad stuff, and you have Professor Stokes trying to teach him good things. It was very psychologically good, and Robert
It
Rodan sells
it's
that.
very Pinocchio like. You're right.
Yeah,
That's the best analogy there I think you could draw.
yeah, and Robert Rodan really does a good job of selling both sides of it too. He doesn't get enough credit for selling it. And I think that's something I hope people grow to appreciate about the Adam arc too, because he was important from a
Now,
story context.
okay, so some questions.
Sure.
Just yes or no. Did do you think there was ever a storm and Adam got afraid in the middle of the night and knocked on Professor Stokes's door?
No. No.
Okay. Do you think he ever knocked on his door because he needed a glass of water in the middle of the night?
No. I think.
Okay. Do you think he ever had a bad dream and crawled into bed with Professor Stokes? Not in a romantic way, but like a child.
No. Yes. Because
2 words, potty training. What do you think?
I think so, yes.
These are all, these are serious considerations.
No. I do think he's remember, Barnabas teaches him how to speak, but Barnabas doesn't get the time to teach him. Again, we know it's not going to be shown, but how to use the restroom. He's teaching him how to eat and stuff. And
You're right.
But
who was that? Willie who had to teach him that? Now, Adam, you're not going to fall in. I'm telling you.
That would have been good if it was John Carlin's Willie Loomis. But I do think that's where sort of Stokes gets the credit. Who taught him this is what you do in the restroom. He taught him more where Barnabas was trying to teach him etiquette. Professor Stokes ups the etiquette, I'll say.
You're so right. You're so right. Oh, God. Joel, I love the fact that you take that question legitimately seriously and that you really explore it with an earnest heart. I think that's beautiful.
I love Dark Shadows.
You're a dad. You know that? You really are.
I am.
You're a dad.
Here's the thing: when you help potty, me and my wife or potty train our kids, so it's like.
Mm-hmm.
Oh my God! But really, really great actor Robert Rodan was, but great actor.
He is.
Overall, what did you think of the episode we've been discussing? 1,229.
For me, it was a lot more interesting than the last episode.
Yeah.
Because it had more ghosty, multi-generational, time travel-y sort of things. I like that stuff.
And I really love how they leave Kate Jackson with the point of what it leaves a question, because she does pick up a flintlock pistol in this episode. You sort of wonder, what is she gonna do? And that's she doesn't do anything with the pistol, but the fact that they pose that question in this arc and in this episode is really, really good.
Do you think Roger ever left a flintlock around for David just hoping he had a horrible accident? Well, like in the early days.
Well, he did leave his pistol in the desk in the drawing room, loaded.
Sure. That's where you keep it.
It was around, and everybody seemed to know where it was. So,
sure.
I think that
sure. Community property.
Right. It's like did everybody know where the liquor was? Yes. So did everybody know where the gun was? Yes.
Yeah, 2 great tastes.
In Dark Shadows, I think unless it was a secret passage you honestly didn't know about, they knew stuff was there. Like the gun.
Joel, there was no secret passage they honestly didn't know about. They knew about all the secret passages.
Yeah.
That's the first thing you learned.
Yeah, you learned from Roger that he knows about the secret passage in the drawing room, which I like.
It's true.
Nobody mentions that what I've always found interesting, and this is how secretive Joshua is, and I love this. Nobody knew about the secret room in the mausoleum. No, for years.
Sure.
Which I love. That's a little tidbit of Dark Shadows that is really, really cool. And there's a lot of cool stuff.
I agree.
Is there anything? Sorry.
I am done. I am spent. I have no more.
It's a really good episode. Sorry if I talked over you at all. I was excited.
No, I enjoyed it.
I'm trying to think if there's any questions I have for you. I do have, I think, one. With Kate, did you think Kate Jackson's character was going to shoot somebody with the flintlock?
No, because I knew they were all going to show up in more episodes.
Yeah.
It would have been too much of a... Because who she shoot? Is she going to shoot Bromwell?
Yeah.
No, it's Jonathan Fritte's the star of the show. Is she going to shoot Catherine? No, it's Laura Parker. She's the other star of the show. So the list is pretty narrow at that point, and yeah, they just don't have the casting budget for for her to shoot.
I do, even though you're right, it's sort of, you realize there's nobody she can shoot. I still love that they posed the question in this episode: will she shoot somebody? Which is really cool. It's not a tease. It's just a little fun writing in the episode. But that's my only real question I had for you for that one. Guys, link to the Dark Shadows Daybook Unbound is going to be in the description box. I'm going to do a read along after this. Patrick, my brother,
what are you covering?
Yeah, what are you doing tomorrow night, dude?
What are you going to be covering?
I'm covering.
I'm free.
I'm covering episode 1197 in the Dark Shadows Daybook Unbound. That's the part I'm picking up from.
Okay.
That's where I'm at in the daybook. So do you want to do 1,230 tomorrow night?
I love it.
All right.
I love it. Let's do it.
My friend, you enjoy the rest of your night and have a safe night, buddy.
Take care, sir.
Bye-bye.